Hello and welcome to NJ Fire Guys Podcast, run number 36. Tonight's guest, very special guest. We were actually able to track him down. He was traveling around chasing Carmen San Diego. Mike Abraham from an organization to be named later. Firefighter EMT Michael Abraham began his fire service career as a volunteer firefighter in Piscataway. While attending, hold on, drop the ball. While attending Rutgers University, he worked as an emergency services officer. After graduating with a degree in electrical engineering, he obtained his professional engineering license and provided design and construction consulting for projects throughout the New York metro area. In 2015, Mike was presented with the opportunity to combine his fire service expertise and engineering background as a forensic electrical engineer for the Northwest Fire Investigation Firm. 1 year later, he started his current position as a forensic electrical engineer with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, also better known as the ATF. In his current role, he brings forensic engineering expertise as a field engineer to international, federal, state, and local origin and cause investigations for fire and explosions. As a member of the ATF National Response Team, he has been part of several very high-profile large loss fire and explosion investigations. Without further interruption, I'd like to introduce Michael Abraham. Hey, Mike,
How's it
what's
going,
going on
Nick?
tonight? How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
There was a couple times I thought I was going to be tongue-tied and a flutter.
Yeah, it sounds fancier than it is, I think.
No, come on, you're the man. You're all over the place.
That's true. I do travel a lot for what I do right now.
All right, so where are you from? Were you a Piscataway boy all your life, or?
No, actually, I was born in Jersey City, and a lot of my family lived in Jersey City while I was growing up. Um, family moved out, spread out from there, and we ended up in Piscataway. But that's pretty much where I'm from. Spent a lot of time in New York City as well because we were there. You know, a lot of ties to the community and things going on over there. But Hudson County is where I'm originally from now. Yes, in Piscataway in Middlesex County.
Okay, all right, all right. So, what brought you to the fire service, the emergency services?
That it's an interesting story. So I was in high school, and I remember it pretty clearly. I was in I think it was like AP statistics class or something like that. And there was a guy in my class, and a pager went off, and I was like, "What
Did
is
it wake you
that?"
up?
Well, yeah, exactly. Uh, but my main question was like, what the heck is this going on? Because really, by that point, this is around like 2002, 2003.
Okay.
People weren't exactly using pagers and stuff like that or anything anymore. And he goes, "Oh, it's my fire pager," and I'm like, "Fire pager? What's that?" Because you got to remember, I grew up in Jersey City. I
Yeah,
grew up in
yeah, yeah.
Hudson
There's no
County. There's no
volunteers.
such thing as volunteer fire service over there. And actually, one of my earliest fire memories was actually a fire that happened down the block when I grew up in Jersey City. And I remember that because they had put a supply line through the windows of a car that was parked in front of a hydrant. And so anyway, that was like an early memory and stuff like that. And his pager goes, I'm like, "What is that?" He goes, "Oh, it's my fire pager." I'm like, "Fire pager? What does that mean?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a firefighter here in town. This is in Piscataway at the high school." And he goes, "Yeah, we have, volunteer fire service." I was like, "Why would anybody volunteer to be a firefighter? Like, it's a crazy job. Like, that's ridiculous." So he goes, "No, yeah, the Piscataway's all volunteer." I'm like, "Really?" So, I think I was a senior in high school at that point, and I'm like, why do you do that? He's like, "Oh, give back to the community, this, that, everything." I was like, "Oh, that's a good reason." It's like, it doesn't hurt for like college applications and things like that. I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." So I'm like, "Let me join. Where do you do this?" So he was a member of North Stelton Fire in Piscataway,
Okay.
but I didn't live by there. He's like, "Oh yeah, you could join, but you live by River Road." So I actually went down to the River Road Firehouse in Piscataway, right across the river from New Brunswick and stuff like that. And that was it. I joined over there, and then here we are. I met a lot of the people over there. They were pretty awesome. I was like, oh, how does this work? They're like, oh, we send you to training, you go to the fire academy, you get like kind of on the job training and this. I'm like, really? This is all new to me. And, went through all that kind of stuff. Yeah. There's a picture of me in gear for the people that think I'm a desk person nowadays, which I guess is how it is when you're investigating fires sometimes. But that's one of those. But yeah, I still maintain active volunteer fire membership through the North Stone Fire Company.
Okay.
But like you mentioned, I do travel a lot, so I'm not necessarily in town a lot. But when I do come around, I try to ride calls, and I also try to bring back to the fire service whatever I can that I learn on the road, especially with being able to deal with fire departments and the fire service around the world now. But did that, and then at that time I also started going to Rutgers, and I had met a bunch of their guys because being on River Road in Piscataway, we covered the Bush campus of Rutgers University. So I ended up getting a job at Emergency Services. We were doing life safety inspections and kind of doing fire service related stuff along those aspects. And they also, have an ambulance service over there. So I was like, all right, I'll get my EMT. So I got my EMT and I started riding the ambulance over there too. And I still maintain that. But around that time, I also, I think I rode a little bit for a rescue squad in town. But that's pretty much the early stages of that. And I rode for a while, like 10 years over there at River Road, where, got to go mutual aid all over the place, going to a decent, sets of fires with North Stoughton, which I joined, like, I think, about 13 years ago or something like that. Still, whenever we got to go to fires, I remember one was the picture on the background you have actually on the podcast. That's the fire in North Brunswick. I think that was in like 2015. So the reason I like that picture is because if you zoom in on the front bumper of that engine right there, that's the last engine that we had. Yeah, I'm sitting on the bumper on that picture that somebody took a panoramic shot of the entire scene of when the sunrise was coming about. So that was a cool picture from that. And that was an interesting fire. But yeah, that was my,
That was a long that was a
yeah.
long
I think
day
we were there
and
for
night.
I think I was there for at least 13 hours. And that's another time I
Right.
was asking myself, like, who volunteers to do stuff like this? I'm sitting here for 13 hours. But at the end of the day, I think public service and giving back to the community is important. My family has a lot of people that are public servants, let's say. So my father works for the New York City Transit Authority in New York City. I have aunts, cousins, and my grandmother are all registered nurses, kind of, doing that kind of stuff. So I've always been around it and things like that, and more than happy to be a part of it and do whatever I can to help with things. So this has been a good run so far, I guess. But
Yeah, I'd say, you're kind of well known around the globe lately.
yeah, I mean, so after I graduated from Rutgers, like you mentioned, I started doing like uh, design and construction work. So I have a degree in electrical engineering. I did a lot of like typical building systems, like power systems, fire alarm systems primarily, and I ended up kind of having a niche in fire protection system design. Probably because of my interest in the fire service and everything too. So I focused on that. Did a lot of training and a lot of design projects all throughout New York City. Everything was in like New York City, and
Okay.
did that for a while. And I didn't really know much about the private fire investigation world, but I actually met somebody who was a retired firefighter and was a fire investigator for a private company. And he was like, "Oh, you're a firefighter and you have an electrical engineering background. That'd be pretty a good combination for somebody to be, a forensic engineer." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm definitely interested in that." And I had some exposure to forensics, right? Because when I was doing design and construction work, there was a lot of construction related forensics that we got involved with. So
Mhm.
somebody would say, like, I remember one, there was like an undersized fire pump for a condo complex. And there was a lawsuit because they're saying, oh, like whoever designed this fire pump, undersized it, and now they can't maintain pressure in the furthest parts of the system. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of like engineering analysis that's a part of that to
Mhm.
figure out who's at fault here, what kind of changes need to be made. And it was definitely interesting. So when he presented me with this opportunity, I was like, sure, I'll, as long as you're willing to kind of, help me learn more about what's going on in that sector, I'd be more than happy to kind of to get on board. So I did that. That
Can
was
I ask
actually
you
with,
who it was?
yeah, it was Unified Investigations at the time. and I got hired by them, and I was the double E for the Northeast. So basically,
Okay.
they had not had a double E in New York City for forever. But I mean, we're doing private fire investigations and stuff
Yeah.
that almost every fire can benefit from a double E to help as a part of the investigation. So they never had
Mm-hmm.
anybody, and I got on board. And actually, I met a lot of people that run in our common circles in the fire investigation
Yeah.
community at that time. So I know
Mm-hmm.
you had like Bob Disbro on the podcast, right? I remember
Yeah.
my first private sector fire scene investigation was in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And I walked into
Okay.
the burned out, I think it was an apartment or something like that. And he was standing there. And I think we had met each other a couple of times beforehand and things like that. He's like, "Oh, I know you. You're a fireman, right? Yeah, I'm gonna give you the shovel. We gotta get to work and do this kind of stuff." It was pretty good. So, even though it was double E, I was more than happy to help out and everything. So that was like one of my first experiences that I remember. And of course, he's involved with all kinds of stuff, and I see him all over the place. And he's
Yeah.
a great person to kind of learn from and learn about how things
Definitely.
should be done. You know,
Definitely.
so
Absolutely.
people like him, and then kind of did that for about a year. And at that point, I'm trying to get more and more training and
Mm-hmm.
experience in fire investigation. Uh, try to like apply the craft. So I'm taking
Yeah.
classes all over the place, and the opportunity came up for an electrical fire investigation class offered in Ocean City, Maryland, that was being taught by an ATF instructor. So I said,
Okay.
let me put in for this. And the company that I worked for was like, sure. It wasn't actually unified even. It was the private. So I also was doing my the engineering work still. And
Okay.
actually, towards the end of that, I actually ran my own design company for about 4 years. So they were like, yeah, we'll send you down there if you want to, go learn more about this stuff. I went there, and I met those guys, and they were like, and this, like, so not all engineers are created equal, right? So
Well,
they
I was gonna, not to cut you off from the train of thought. I was actually gonna ask, what was when you went to school for electrical engineering, what path did you have in mind originally? Like, what were you
I
thinking you were gonna do?
So at that time, everybody that went into like electrical engineering chose like one or two paths. You were either going into like power systems, which is like, building systems and power
Yeah.
generation, distribution, all that kind of stuff. The other side of it is like computer systems, communication systems, things of that
Okay.
nature. Well, I actually have a concentration in communication systems, so wireless communication systems, whether
Okay.
that be like,
Which goes to fire alarm systems perfectly.
absolutely that kind of stuff. But I also did a focus on power systems. So
Okay.
I actually, my last year of school, I did a co-op internship with a design firm and pretty much got on the job hands-on experience working with actual construction, related engineers and
Okay.
contractors. So that's what kind of gave me a big background in like understanding systems, how they're
Yeah.
built and how they work
Mm-hmm.
and everything. So that kind of kept me on the side of like, what a lot of fire investigators encounter, right? When you go to a structure fire or a vehicle fire, you have to understand power systems and how they can
Mm-hmm.
contribute to, potential ignition scenarios, things of that nature. So it kind of went hand in hand. It'd probably be a little bit more difficult if I did a concentration on like computer programming to do this kind of work, right?
Yeah.
So that's what my background was in, and I think it helps me a lot in being a pretty well-rounded investigator in general, just being able to
Oh,
understand
absolutely.
electrical, mechanical systems, all that kind of stuff. But those guys met me, and being around the firehouse and things like that, I kind of you know I can talk and I can hang out with people and things of that nature. So they were like, hey,
Yeah.
we're always at the ATF. We have forensic engineers that work at the Fire Research Laboratory, and we need people that can hold a conversation. They can get answers to
Yeah.
questions from
That can
people.
fit in our circle.
Yeah,
that
but more
that
importantly,
aren't
it's like,
square pegs.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, more importantly, we need people that can explain things in a way that people can understand it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
think about when you go to court and stuff like that, you have to explain
Yep.
pretty complex topics to
So
a
that the
jury.
jury,
The
which my
12
my
people
dad
that
always
couldn't
said that the
12
you go
people that
ahead.
couldn't 12 people that couldn't come up with a good enough excuse to get out of jury duty, right? So,
My dad's always said it.
oh, it's true. So you have to explain these things to those people, and you have to be able to do it in a way that people can understand and get the value out of what you're trying to explain. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I think I've been able to do that. And so they were like, hey, you should, consider applying here. And I was like, well, I'm not exactly like the type of person that would consider working for somebody like the ATF or anything like that. Put in the application,
There might be a
and
traffic ticket.
yeah, there's whatever there is. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on. But let's see how this works out. I'll put it for and put in for the process. They offered me the job. I got hired, and then that's history. We're here.
Now, are you an officer and like did you have to go to FLETC or?
I am a forensic engineer with the ATF. It's a different career track than being a special agent with the ATF, right? So
Okay.
we have certified fire investigator agents around the country. They're the gun carrying, arrest making people that you encounter or see in the news and all that kind of stuff. They're the ones that are spread out all over the place and kind of the boots on the grounds and the first line to interface with the communities and stuff as far as like fire investigations are concerned. I am one of, I don't know how many there are now, probably 7 field forensic engineers at the ATF, which is comprised of people like fire protection engineers, some mechanical engineers, but they have concentrations in like combustion science. And then there's even less electrical engineers. So we have, right now, there's 2 of us in the field. My 2 bosses, my immediate supervisor and the chief of the fire research lab are both electrical engineers as well. But, they don't exactly do the work all the time because they're doing a lot of the boss work. So
That's
there's 2
why
of us.
that's why your the swipe on your GTCC is getting worn out.
Yeah, exactly. So, we kind of go around and just like on the private sector, how there's a need for forensic electrical engineering because of what you're going to come across on a fire scene. The same thing exists for public sector fire investigations, right?
Absolutely.
And what a lot of people don't even realize is that the ATF has the Fire Research Laboratory, and we serve as the public sector's resource for forensic engineering. So if
Hmm.
you're a local, county, state, federal agency, whether law enforcement or fire service, you have us as a resource to help with your investigation, answer questions that come up, help figure out what could be a contributing cause towards a cause scenario, whether it's arc mapping to help narrow down the origin of something, whatever it may be. And that's what I do. I'm basically a subject matter expert on, engineering matters to help fire investigators figure out what's going on.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, other than the years of school you've gone through, you have my dream job.
Yeah, I mean, so
Be
it
an
is.
investigator for the ATF and not have to go to FLETC.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's so if you become an ATF agent and a fire investigator, you kind of have an area of response within your jurisdiction. So like in New Jersey, for example, we have 3 full-time fire investigators with ATF right now, and they have specific areas around here. And of course, you may regionally respond out to help, like
Hmm.
fires going on in Pennsylvania. Maybe you'll help fires going on in New York. Me being one of 2 field forensic electrical engineers, I go to every
Everything.
potential fire scene in the United States as well as in our territories. I've been
Hmm.
to fire scenes I was trying to figure it out the other day, and I can't even keep track anymore. I should have one of those like maps of where I've been. But every corner of the United States I've been to. I've been to Guam, been to Alaska. I'm not a cold weather fan. I would have never been in Alaska for any other reason, but I was up there and it was amazing. When you see Alaska, like, wow, it's even better in person than it was in pictures with the snow-capped mountains and all that kind of stuff.
I was gonna say, did you go in the summer or the winter?
I went originally in the wintertime and then I had to go back in the summertime. So I got to see both. I got to see it in the wintertime when you expect Alaska to be Alaska when it's dark all the time. And I also got to go back in the springtime when it was daytime most of the time. So it's crazy, right? You get that. I remember we landed at 11 p.m. at night and it looked like noon outside. So
Not
it
cool.
was that.
Not cool.
But Alaska, Guam, Virgin Islands, a lot of states around the country, and being from Jersey and being from an urban area, I get along with a lot of the urban investigators that we have. So I end up going to a lot of the urban environments. I've been to the city of Los Angeles, been to Chicago, been to Miami. I do a lot of work in New York City. I maintain an active relationship with the FDNY like they just I think like a week ago I was there teaching as a part of their FDNY Fire Marshal Academy going on right now.
Okay.
And a couple of days ago I was there with them because they hosted the Department of Homeland Security and lithium ion battery workshop. So that brought together like people from around the country kind of talking about what kind of research can people do, whether it's the DHS, us at the ATF, and other entities, like the federal laboratories, to come up with answers on how to deal with the lithium ion battery problem, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of what happens there and what I do. So yeah.
So now I mean, we touched on this in the pre-show, but I gotta ask, like, 10 years ago, did you see lithium-ion batteries being what it is now?
Yeah, so I mean, we know that lithium ion batteries have been around for a long time, right? But when
Mhm.
I talk about it and we talk about incidents, there's definitely an increased prevalence of batteries in what I call the modern fire environment related to that, just because
Mhm.
of everything that we have that's cordless now. Everybody's got a cell phone which has a lithium battery in it. Everybody's got laptops, iPads, and then you move on to other scale things, right? Like your e-bikes, your hoverboards, your
Yeah.
scooters. Then you go up to like
Well,
your electric vehicles and
and then
all that
that
kind of
was
stuff.
that was gonna be my next question was, do you think it's more of a we're having more batteries fail because there's more batteries out there, or do you think it's more of a the technology itself is unstable?
So I don't think it's an inherent flaw in the technology. I don't think that that's what it is. I think that because of the prevalence and the quantities of it out there, yes, statistically, you're more
Yeah,
likely to
you're just
have
bringing your statistics. Gotcha.
something to occur, but also you have people trying to make cheaper versions of things. So
Mm-hmm.
certain design manufacturing tolerances aren't taken into account because it allows them to make a cheaper alternative to what would otherwise be, let's say, an OEM product. People
Yeah.
like New York City, for example, they recently passed local laws which require lithium battery powered products to be tested and listed with a nationally recognized testing laboratory, things like UL, ETL, things of that nature. But that's not everything that you're going to find on like Amazon for say. When you go on Amazon and you find like a charger or a battery that's half the cost of the OEM one, you got to think to yourself like, okay, what's different in this that allows it to be half the cost? And when you start mixing and
Mm-hmm.
matching things, that's where kind of problems can happen. But so as fire investigators, you have to be familiar with what you're going to face in the fire environment.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started doing this regularly, it already was becoming an issue. It's the new cigarette, I like to say. And for that reason alone, being with the ATF Fire Research Laboratory, one of the questions we constantly get asked is like, how can we help figure out whether or not a lithium battery failure caused a fire or if it was the victim of a fire? So
Mm-hmm.
about 8 years ago, I started doing research projects with CFI candidates and other people. And we've been doing these projects to kind of gain more knowledge about lithium battery fires. And that's why I've kind of, I guess I've developed a name in the lithium battery world because
Yeah, God.
that has, no, I don't know about all that, but that has led to opportunities to speak on the subject and collaborate with other people worldwide, not just in the United States but worldwide,
Yeah.
which have been some of the most incredible experiences, especially in the past couple years, that I've had, and in being able to meet some of the amazing people working in the fire service, in investigations, and even just regular fire suppression and rescue services that have to deal with this.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's on the I think this is one spot where the old guys in the firehouse and the young guys in the firehouse are on the same page that we
Yeah,
need to pay attention to this. And it's really again, we were talking about this before in the pre-show, that this is somewhere where the fire service is actually, is uniting. Like,
yeah.
but it's something that there's only two of you.
Yeah, for now. I mean, the
Yeah.
numbers fluctuate. You know how the government is. Like, sometimes you
Yeah.
have more people, sometimes you have less. But we're in a low period right now, which means that we'll be bouncing around even more often from scene to scene. So being a field engineer, primarily my job is to help on scenes, and most people think that, oh, you're with ATF, you're getting involved with just, high profile federal investigations. That's not true at all. The majority of what I do is working with local fire departments and their fire
Mm-hmm.
investigators, figuring things out. That's probably the
Well,
greatest part of this
'cause
job that I can think of, is the fact that I get to meet
so
people in the
many
fire
people.
service around the country,
Mm-hmm.
and I get to. It's funny, like you're from Jersey, and I go places. First of all, I think we talked about this earlier too. Everywhere I go, there's somebody that knows somebody or is originally from New Jersey. It doesn't
Yep.
matter where I go in the
And they
United
pop out of the
States.
woodwork and they're like, "Hey, I heard you're from Jersey."
Yeah, exactly. That's how it is. So that's always a good jumping off point.
Yeah,
Talking
absolutely.
about bringing down like barriers and like having people open up to you. If like something like that happens, right away you start talking about things. So
Yep.
that helps.
Yep.
And I went to Rutgers, so that's another thing. There's like a lot of people that went to Rutgers that are transplants now, in all kinds of like high positions everywhere. And they're like, oh yeah, I went to Rutgers. I'm like, oh, me too. I went to the Ivy Leagues of the public institutions as well, like I like to put it. So
I like it. I
yeah.
like that. So, oh shit, what was I gonna say? I don't know. So, what is one takeaway that you're getting um, from your travels and kind of um, from around the fire service, if you will?
Yeah.
Like, what's
So
one takeaway you're getting from like
well, I
one
mean
thing that we have in common or that we don't do
I mean every
well?
I mean I wouldn't say that there's anything that people per se are not doing well and stuff like that. But I tell you what, that I that hits me the most when I work on them with people is I think I've done like maybe 15 line of duty death investigations I've been a part of now
Mm,
since I've been with ATF. So unfortunately, those are occurring still.
yeah.
And it's one of those things where normally we get involved with the fire investigation and you're helping determine the origin and cause, and that's the end of it. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the origin and cause investigation can develop a lot of information that helps understand the circumstances that
Mm-hmm.
contributed towards the conditions in which something like that can occur. So
Absolutely.
um, one of the things that I try to do is you try to learn something from every fire scene that I go to, even though it's after the fact, right? Like I like to joke when I teach that ATF stands for after the fact because we're getting there after the fire's been put out, which is not
Yeah.
always true. I mean, people are calling during fires too. I mean, I was talking to people, they got this one going on in Missouri right now, so it's like, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big fire going on out there, and we're trying to stay on top of it and understand what's going on, but that being said, I think one of the biggest takeaways that I try to learn from and stuff is any contributing factors that I can come across that um, could have contributed to a line of duty death. I personally, as a firefighter, I try to learn from them, and I also try to bring them back to like my firehouse and stuff. Right? Try to
Mm-hmm.
talk about like you know operational aspects and things that we learned about through our investigation that otherwise,
Yeah.
a lot of times when the reports come out and you hear about things, you may not hear about the actual the nitty gritty of what went down. And so learning about that stuff is a key takeaway. And it's a concern not only here in the United States, but it's everywhere, right? So even when I talk on like these international platforms, people are concerned about that. They always, want to learn from these experiences, and I think that's one of the big things that I kind of try to contribute towards and get as a takeaway from working on these scenes. What can we do to prevent line of duty deaths, operationally and stuff like that, and what kind of instances contributed towards the actual fire that may have resulted in the death of a firefighter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it, this isn't a battery issue, but you look at the Boyd Street fire in Los Angeles a few years
Yep.
back. The little whippets that they were using to
Yeah.
extract the CBD
So
oils and
I,
stuff.
I talk about that fire. So that was a national response team call out too. So I was out there as a part of that investigation. And I talk about that when I talk about lithium batteries because, that was what do you call it? Like a vape shop, storage warehouse. So you
Yeah.
mentioned these little nitrous oxide containers that
Yeah.
people use. They had a lot of butane. But on top of that, that place was filled with disposable vapes, and all of those vapes have lithium ion batteries in them. So
Mhm.
as we're digging through this thing, I must have, examined and x-rayed and documented thousands and thousands of these things coming out, because until you have enough information to, make a cause determination, these kind of things are in play. And we got to kind of explain about, okay, like, what could have happened with one of these? Because we know lithium batteries can have failures at various points in their life cycle
Mhm.
for various reasons, and
Yep.
we have to consider it. So that's a great example of a massive fire incident that injures people, injures firefighters. It's a massively,
Yeah.
documented incident. You've seen the videos with like the entire block going up
Yeah.
and everything like that. And that's another example of the types of fire investigations we get involved with.
Yeah. So I gotta cut in real quick because we talked about him in the pre-show.
Oh, the challenge coin collection. Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of, I guess, uh, something that came along with what I'm doing too. So like, I was not necessarily a challenge coin person or anything per se, but doing the type of work you do with the ATF, meeting law enforcement and fire service agencies around the country, people start exchanging challenge coins and stuff. It's like, oh, all right, I'll trade you one. And so these challenge coins, every single one, which this is a fraction of them. This is how many I could fit on right now. All have a story of either a fire scene I worked, a class I taught, or some sort of fire service related engagement I had with somebody. I mean, some of
Earned,
the
not
earliest ones I
purchased.
have, none of them are purchased. None of these are purchased challenge coins. They all have a story. Like I have one from Rutgers over there. I went to Rutgers University. I worked at Rutgers Emergency Services. So of course I have representing Rutgers up there. Every city that I've been to, if they have something like challenge coins that they have, we end up, trading, and that's what that collection is from. Yeah, it is. It's. I used to have these kind of sitting around in a Tupperware bin, and I was like, all right, I've got to figure out a way to kind of display these. And a local FBI agent actually made this display board for a couple of us, and that's what you got back there. So
I like it.
yeah,
I like
that's
that.
a
Now
that's
it's got the badge inlaid.
yeah, it's got an inlaid badge, got the combination blue and red thin line, just because we are a combination. I deal with police and fire everywhere I go. So even though I'm a firefighter, that's what I am. I went to the
Yeah.
fire academy. I've been in the fire service, but working with law enforcement is a part of our job. The ATF is a law enforcement agency, so primarily we're doing fire investigations to figure out if a crime was committed, and
Yeah.
my job is to serve as an expert to help put people away if they need to explain stuff in court. That's my job.
Love it. I love it. So I remember what I wanted to ask before. You guys are um interstate commerce. Anything that's involves interstate or international commerce, you guys are involved in, right?
Yeah, I mean
So
that's one of
that's
the ways.
a lot
One of the ways the ATF
to
can
get the
can get
ATF
involved.
involved.
Yeah, it can get involved in an investigation is anything that affects interstate commerce. So when you think about anything that crosses state lines, sold in commercially, rental properties, things of that nature. But I we when people ask about how the ATF helps people, there are no particular thresholds when it comes to like a size of a fire or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
We will provide assistance, technical assistance for fire investigations, regardless of what happened. And actually, the way that we like to put it is that anything of community interest that we can help with, we'll get involved with. I mean, most recently, they had a Catholic school fire in Pennsylvania. Went out there and helped out with that. It wasn't a massive fire or anything, too big, but it had impact on the community. That community over there was impacted by that happening. I remember went to Des Moines, Iowa, I think it was. There was a bowling alley that burned down. And that was one of the places where I saw the most bystanders ever while we were working a fire scene, because so many people had, ties to that bowling alley, and it burned down and it impacted the community. So we get involved with the big ones like the ghost ship that I mentioned. I don't know if did you throw that one up? I think I had provided a picture from that with the dogs.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so that picture is actually from when I was at the Ghost Ship Warehouse fire. So that was one of the first fires I ended up working. There was 36 fatalities on it at the end of the day. And, I'm a big fan of the accelerant detection canines and all the other, I like dogs in general. And these are called comfort dogs. So they brought them out for like the general public and everybody there just to kind of make people feel better. You know how it is, you pet a dog and you see a dog and it makes you feel better. And at that time, they didn't know how many people had died in that fire, and it was kind of really depressing for everybody. So they brought them out and they asked us to take a picture with the dogs, and I was like, sure, you know. So that was one of those pictures, and that's another, a massive incident, obviously, that we helped out with. We helped the Oakland Fire Department with that investigation, but it doesn't need to be that. It could be, a single room and contents fire in a small community that affects a family or something like that.
Yeah. Speaking of family, I have a comment here.
Oh, yeah, that's my uncle. Yeah, he worked for UPS actually. He went to Rutgers as well. Lives out there in Atlanta, but he's from New Jersey as well.
All right.
Yeah.
And another comment from Chief Mullen. Still
Oh
one of
yeah,
my biggest shows.
yeah. Chief Mullen. I mean, first of all, I have to say that I'm not sure what I'm doing on this platform with the types of interviewees that you've had. Chief Mullen is an example of somebody that's like an ultra progressive, like fire chief, making an impact in the fire service, and then you got somebody like me here. So I don't know what to
I
say about that.
I gotta say, you're making an impact too. Just like I told him, it's the impact is the message. Every firefighter has a message. You know, we in New Jersey just can't help it that our message is so much greater than every other state in the
That's
country.
true.
I mean, it is.
Yeah,
It is what
that's
it is.
definitely true. I do travel when I go places. They'll start by saying like, "Oh, you don't sound like you're from around here." Not that I have you know, a Jersey accent per se or a New
We
York
don't have an
accent. But
accent. They have an accent.
yeah, exactly. And then not only that, they'll be like, "Oh, you talk too fast." I was like, "No, I think you talk a little bit too slow. Maybe you can move a little bit quicker and we can get some things done." It's a conversation
Yeah.
I have all over the place. So there's stuff like that. But I mean, it's the Jersey side is really important to me because it's a good jumping off point for a lot of conversations everywhere. A lot of people like, oh, you're in New Jersey, this, that, but people don't realize how awesome it can be in New Jersey. And I'm a big fan of that and
Exactly.
a big proponent of it.
Everybody thinks, who was the comedian? Oh, I want to say it was like Dane Cook or something. Somebody in the '90s. Big
Mhm.
comedian in the '90s was like, "Oh, New Jersey, the Garden State. Yeah, if you're growing smokestacks and
Right.
chemical plants." You
Yeah.
obviously never got to South Jersey and saw all the pine barrens and
Yeah, I mean,
farms,
I tell people all the time,
which,
like Jersey has definitely areas like that, right? If you're driving down
yeah,
95 and you're going through Kearney and things like that, you're like, you know, it's kind of
you
rough.
you
And nothing
fly
against
into
Kearney.
Newark Airport.
Yeah, exactly. You see that stuff, but yeah, people don't get to see the other parts of the state, including South Jersey. That's another thing. That being said, I'm from North Jersey and stuff like that, so we'll see. That's what people kind of know. But then I kind of explain to them, no, you can get places where you got like blueberries, right? There's like I think New Jersey's like the blueberry capital or something like that.
Hamilton,
Yeah,
Hamilton.
exactly. Like who would have thought something like that? And then the Garden State and everything. So yeah, I'm a proponent of that kind of information as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fly into Atlantic City Airport instead of Newark. You get a
Right.
totally different view.
Yeah.
But that being said, talking about the wildland, we got wildfires all over New Jersey right now. Let's talk about that. Wildland Urban Interface Task Force, right? Or
Yeah.
platform.
So like you mentioned, the lithium battery stuff kind of took off, and because I got involved with it pretty early and with the research on that, that opened up avenues for like, the World Fire Congress, right? So I presented over there, where I think it was attended by 56 countries, the European Union, the United Nations, everybody, and including other topics that everybody cared about were things like wildfires. They cared about climate change and the impact on the fire service. They cared about things like firefighter health and safety, all kinds of stuff like that. And the wild and urban interface conversation is the other big thing that keeps coming up amongst all these kind of organizations. So I've been involved with a couple of wild and urban interface fire investigations, primarily because of the fact that, you know, when you're in the wild and urban interface, you got things like, electrical utility that's going to come up. And those cause issues. Excuse me. And so even like recently, like the Maui wildfires, right? You know, that was one of those fires that had the opportunity to get involved with. Um, and you know, it was witnessed, right? A lot of people saw what happened, but we ended up writing up an origin and cause to kind of explain the circumstances. That being said, you know, it's a growing concern. I myself, I never considered myself like a wildfire person, right? You know, first of all, I grew up in North Jersey, living in Central Jersey, but you know, peeps talking to people like
Hey,
Bob and
you guys got the Edison, the Raritan Center after school specials all the time.
Absolutely. I've been to mutual aid requests for fires over there. I mean, I've been to fires in the Rutgers Ecological Preserve. That counts too, right? Things of that nature.
Yeah, hell
But
yeah.
that being said, these fires are occurring more and more. And in addition to having all these like international and national advisory groups and panels that are discussing lithium batteries, the other big conversation that I'm starting to become a part of is the wild and urban interface. You know, how do we prevent fires where the utility infrastructure is butting up against, you know, wildland areas, and prevent these giant, massive events that end up displacing a lot of people, killing a lot of people? They end up becoming massive fires, right? Oh, like Maui. If you think about Maui, and this is all on the news and everything like this, there was 102 fatalities, 2,000 structures burned. I think the estimated value of the damage is approaching 5.5 to $6 billion. So how can you not think about the impact on the community something like that has, and how
Yeah,
do we prevent something like that in the future? So part of my the work that I'm doing as far as fire investigations now is to have a better understanding of those things, so that way I could bring the information back to the table as a part of things like you mentioned, the Wild and Urban Interface Advisory Committee with UL, so we can have a more knowledgeable and informed conversation of how to prevent these things.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, who better to have that conversation than somebody from New Jersey, where it, you go from urban to very rural very
Absolutely.
quickly. You know,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
5 minutes, you stay on 295 for 5 minutes. You drive through very wooded areas, very urban areas, and
Yep.
everything in between.
Yep, you got
I
every type
mean,
of environment that you could think of that you'll come across, and I think that's right. And so that's the next topic that's kind of like taking off like wildfire. You know,
if you
where
will. I
if
see what
you
you did there.
exactly, there you go. So I'm a part of those conversations now. We'll see what happens with those. I mean, it's it's only I think a lot of people are talking about it. They know that the wildfires occur. There's a lot of I know that when I was at the World Fire Congress, for example, the U.S. Fire Administration was pushing for a lot of public-private partnerships in technology to
Hmm.
help detect early, you know, provide early detection of wildfires, basically, um, things of that nature, to basically try to, you know, attack and control a problem as soon as possible, so that way you don't end up with a situation that results in, you know, multiple fatalities and a lot of destruction of property.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I mean, it's conversations that have to be had, and unfortunately, you can't solve it by putting smoke detectors in the woods. You know,
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than the structural approach. But I mean, we talked about this, I think, in
satellites.
before the show. Yeah, exactly. I mean, try to leverage satellite technology. That's actually one of the
Yeah,
things that people are talking about. Absolutely.
I
That's
wasn't
part of
joking.
the
I was being serious.
Yeah, no, a lot of people like you know, don't realize that part of the public-private partnership is how can you leverage existing technology like that to, you know, provide early detection in uninhabited areas. And those are some of the things that are being discussed. You know, people way smarter than I are involved in conversations to develop technology to help prevent, you know, loss of life and property from fire, especially in those kind of scenarios.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this guy here. What was
Oh yeah,
going
that was
on
a
in?
pretty cool picture. I shared that because you know, we get a lot of opportunities to do training and stuff being with the ATF and doing fire investigation. And this was an interesting experience. So last year, around this time in the fall, I took a structural specialist class with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and with FEMA. So all those people that you see in the group shot with us are structural specialists for the various task force teams around the United States. Like I mentioned, getting the opportunity to meet people, this was, an opportunity to work with people that are involved in traditional task force deployments, kind of like what people were doing during the hurricanes going on down south and everything. But getting to meet and work with these guys has been amazing as well. We, as the ATF and the National Response Team, we actually work pretty frequently with task force resources to help stabilize fire damaged, partially collapsed structures throughout the country. So I've had the opportunity to work with several task forces, and some of the most amazing people and most capable people that I've met uh, in this country dealing with that kind of stuff. I remember like the triple line of duty death fatal fire in Delaware, in Wilmington, Delaware. They had USAR guys there shoring up that structure. I remember we had them out in San Marcos. They were helping us, Texas Task Force One, all over the place that I've dealt with them. So that was an interesting experience too. You go through the learning experience to try and learn from the scenarios, and it's a hands-on class. It's not a like
Awesome.
a paper book class. It was held
Yeah.
in California. It was like Moffett Field or something. It was like NASA Ames, something like that, out there. And it basically has the playground that kind of like you get to do with USAR training locally here in Jersey. I know that we have a
Yeah.
couple different locations, but on a national scale with resources from around the country. So for us and for me, there's a possibility that I could be working anywhere in the country with people from a variety of agencies. And it's always been important to me that when I work with somebody, it's not the first time that we've ever had to do something together. So I
Exactly.
try to reach, as when you talk about mutual aid, right? Local mutual aid is one thing where you have local entities, and you should train together with them anyway, right? On the fire ground, the way that you're going to experience with them. And I've been
Absolutely.
trying to do that same approach with us at ATF and the National Response Team, where it's like, hey, we're going to end up dealing with people like the Coast Guard. You're going to deal with people like the NTSB. You're going to deal with structural specialists and USAR teams associated with shoring a structure. We kind of need to know how to properly work with these guys. And I don't want to have to, the first time I shake somebody's hand be the first time we meet. Although it happens, if I can, have a joint training opportunity with them, why not, right? And it kind of just makes working together with people around the country that much easier, and that's paid its dividends. If I go
Yeah.
someplace and I have a structural collapse and we want a resource to help us figure out what's going on, we make a phone call and we got people right there. The most recent example of that was in Buffalo, New York, the line of duty death that
Hmm.
occurred up there. New York City Task Force One structural specialists came up and helped us out to evaluate and proceed with the shoring operation that stabilized that building. So we could conduct an investigation to answer the questions about the origin and cause that
Yeah.
ultimately led to a line of duty death.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, Especially if that training happens to be like in Hawaii or in Florida in the springtime when it's cold up here in New Jersey.
I
Eh,
tell
if-
I tell people all the time, my preferred working locations are Southern Florida, the Caribbean, Southern California, and the Pacific Islands if needed. Let me know if you need my help. I'm
if you
available.
need anything,
Any assistance, I'm available. I'm
any,
a phone call away.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. So, are you getting involved with solar at all? Like solar system, solar fires?
Yeah, the conversation, the broader category of conversation for that kind of stuff is emerging technologies and alternative technologies. So that not only includes lithium batteries, but things like solar generation, solar power
Okay.
storage. It includes hydrogen power, hydrogen fuel cells, all those kind of things. It's emerging technology because, like you mentioned, we probably have, you know, a huge amount of lithium ion batteries now versus 10 years ago. And it's going to increase even more moving forward until the technology changes. And we're trying to get involved with the emerging technologies, right? So
Yeah.
I remember at the World Fire Congress, they had a hydrogen powered generator truck there. And the proposal for that kind of a resource is, let's say you have a hurricane that hits, like in Western Carolina, for example,
Hmm.
um, powers out for communities, large communities. You can drive this box truck, which has a hydrogen fuel cell powered generator, and have it sit in the middle of this environment and provide power for, the entire community. So that's going to be coming around the corner. They were deploying or showing, technology like that, which is available to communities and first responders as a resource.
Hydrogen fuel cell. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of there's all kinds of issues. No matter what you talk about, you can have potential issues, right? I mean, hydrogen obviously presents its own issues. Um,
There,
CNG, right?
Hindenburg.
Yeah, exactly. Things
Ah,
of that nature. That's what people think about. So you have to overcome the fear of people before you deploy stuff like that. And that's part of the conversation that we have with people too, right? We had this DHS workshop, and part of it was, all right, industry is doing work to put technology out there. The fire service ends up having to deal with it. You have to make people comfortable with dealing with stuff. And, when they see in this day and age with social media, with camera coverage and all that kind of stuff, all these incidents are getting a lot of airtime. So that's another thing that I kind of talk about. Like, people think like lithium battery fires are occurring all the time. They definitely happen, but it's not necessarily something that's statistically more prevalent than, other types of fires occurring. But guess what? When you get the coverage for an incident, or you have an e-bike that has a failure on a crowded street, it gets a lot of media attention, and that's what's going into the to the
especially when you got 50 people sitting there like this.
Right, exactly. So that's why it gets a lot of attention, and that's how it becomes a hot topic, and that's why
Hmm.
we kind of gotta work together to figure it out. And that's what that workshop was trying to do, right? Bring together people from the fire service. I've been at other symposiums and workshops where you have code council members, you have building construction members, right? Because you want to kind of evolve the modern environment to keep up with the pace of emerging technology. That's the goal.
Yeah.
So, like, when you talk about EVs, right? You're parking them in a parking garage. Does our parking garage structure have what it needs to deal with a potential EV incident? You don't want one of my goals too is, and I say this every time I go to one of these conferences or one of these symposiums. I was like, I don't appreciate the fact that we're putting it on the back of the fire service to figure out how to deal with these issues. I think a
Yep.
lot of engineering controls, a lot of prescriptive codes can be put in place to help prevent the issues that us as the fire service are coming across. And it's being
Exactly.
received by people. However, it's easier said than done, right? You can't just
Well,
all of a sudden
especially
overnight shut things off. So
exactly. Especially you figure like big brands are making a lot of money off this technology, this emerging technology, no matter whether it's solar or EVs or the battery itself. Somebody's making a lot of money off this,
yeah,
and you're putting it on the fire service, who, in turn, to come up with our solutions, we're going back to to Congress, to FEMA, to all these grants to try to fund it. And at the end of the day, who's that go back on? That goes to the taxpayer, who, in
right,
the other hand, is paying for this technology from
right.
the so you know, it's
Well,
essentially the
some of the
guy at the
people,
bar.
yeah, some of the people are saying, some similar things in the fact that money talks, right? Like, so when you start providing information regarding the monetary impact of incidents like this. So, like, if a,
Hmm.
if a community starts saying, well, we're not going to put in EV chargers because of the prevalence of electric vehicle fires, and nobody buys EVs, then all of a sudden the manufacturers and the consumers have to come up with a reason to try to, solve a problem. Or even insurance companies, right? There's been conversations with
Exactly.
that. Maybe insurance companies will have an interest to, minimize the monetary loss on property and life and things of that nature. So you're right in that those conversations that are occurring at a larger scale is what's ultimately going to drive the the resolution to these issues from emerging technology, I believe.
Hmm. Yep. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it again, we're a dozen or so years into this emerging technology of lithium ion batteries, and
Yeah, it's
nobody,
it's called
nobody,
emerging technology, but I feel like it's deeply embedded now. It's no longer just coming
absolutely,
around. It's
yeah.
it's been it's in our life. It's in our everyday life. It's actually the emerging part of it is you come across more and more things that you would never think of, which have lithium ion batteries in them now. So
Hmm.
what may have not been an issue 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago absolutely potentially could be an
Yep.
issue, especially for a fire investigator. You got to start thinking about things that you would have never thought about in the
Yeah.
past. And we know that fire investigation to begin with is difficult if you don't know what's going on there, let alone
Yeah.
if now you have to consider things that come out of left field constantly.
Yep. 100%. Well, and think about even if you got a laptop that's 10, 15 years old, that might be a lithium ion battery fire that just it's 10 or 15 years old and it just finally said, I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm
a
done.
lot of people want to come up with a reason as to why things can happen. It could be an end of life kind of thing, like you said, like a 15-year-old product that went through a number of charge and discharge cycles. It could be something like you know, mechanical failure, thermal abuse, electronic abuse by like improperly charging it and stuff. Yeah, what's that? What's Chief Mullen saying? We just reviewed plans
We
for
just
parking deck and asked them to put the EV charging stations on the top deck away from the building. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that
now
we've been talking about is like a lot of
well,
times they're putting. Uh,
my question with that, Chief, is do you have an apparatus that's going to be able to get to the top deck of that parking structure?
That's an interesting point, and that actually came up during this DHS summit in New York City. We had departments from Seattle, California. They were like, "Hey, how do we get what type of protocols or procedures should we put in place to get a burning EV out of a parking garage structure?" Period. When you're talking about low boys and dollies and things of that nature, that all works for you could tow a car pretty easily from a parking garage, but when it's
Absolutely.
a working fire, when it's fully involved, that's a different conversation, right? And that's what we were talking about. And it was like, oh, that's an interesting point. But that's where people using strategies and tactics like, for example, the EV fire blankets that are marketed, right? That's something that can be used to contain an event and then hopefully give you more time and the ability to work with something rather than just dealing with it inside this contained and confined environment in the parking garage.
Well, and that's what he's saying. More concerned with the smoke banking down inside and not and versus not above, nothing above.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
understand that.
so
I respect that.
absolutely. I mean, the part of the research that we're doing and a lot of people are doing about what kind of byproducts of combustion are you finding in lithium battery fires, right? The heavy metals, the toxins, things of that nature that are going to contaminate the environment that you're in, the exposure to firefighters, things of that nature. So absolutely, dealing with a car fire inside of the garage versus dealing with it outside is probably two different environments. Probably gives him an advantage in that situation. So it's not a
Absolutely.
bad plan. Yep.
Yeah. Especially when you consider spalling, the
Yeah.
higher risk the higher temperatures of the battery in the car and spalling and
Yeah, well,
yeah,
actually, a lot of
I
the
get it.
so a lot of the one of the other panels that I'm a part of is the the electric vehicle technical panel for research that they're doing right now. And one of their goals is actually to specifically characterize the difference between an internal combustion engine fire and electric vehicle fire. So they're trying to answer questions kind of like that we're talking about, like if you had an EV versus an ICE engine, an ICE car inside of a parking garage, what would the potential differences be? So it's ongoing research that'll hopefully help answer questions for the fire service.
Could almost let it burn versus yeah. I agree 100%. 100%.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Uh so now what are you seeing on the solar side?
Um,
What kind of
so
what kind
so
of
the biggest thing with solar that we come across is not necessarily the solar installation or issues with the solar panels or anything like that themselves. The bigger issue is the energy storage systems associated with the solar
Mhm.
system. So
Yeah.
this can be residential, right? So people have solar panels on their roof. They could have, battery storage system in their residence, in their structure. You now have the same lithium battery kind of conversation that we're having, except now in a structure fire that maybe you weren't
Yep.
prepared for. You have that also on a large scale. So, there's solar generation occurring on the grid utility scale. And you're talking about you have to the thing is with a lot of these alternative energy production means you have to, have a way to store the energy if you're producing it, if it's not being used real time. And the best way to
Yeah.
accomplish that right now is with a lithium battery based, energy storage system. And, you've seen in the news and with the fire service incidents like that, like, in Arizona, they had that,
I was gonna say out in Mesa or
yeah,
Phoenix.
that's the a type of example of how the fire service community has to understand what they're coming up against. You may come up against a what looks like a container, and it's not actively burning with flaming combustion. You may see some wisps of gas or whatever it may be. You open up the compartment and now
And boom.
provide some oxygen and achieve a suitable fuel air mix that can now be an explosion, like you said, boom, and you're going to have issues to deal with. I know UL just came out with a publication talking about the explosion risk of lithium ion battery gases, and that's a huge concern. That goes back to what the chief was talking about. If you have an EV failing inside of a parking garage where you don't have active ventilation and you don't have active flaming combustion, which is burning off the byproducts, you may be accumulating explosive gases. And you know how it is. You can reach an ignition source. If you're at the right fuel air mix, you get a big boom, and then you got a bigger
Yep.
problem. So I think that's one of the
What
biggest
was it?
things, to learn from on that.
And what was it down in Mesa? I actually took the ULFSRI, the workshop class on that on their website, and what was it? It launched that guy like the fire captain. It launched him like 200 feet and put him through
Yep.
a chain link fence.
Yeah, and that's
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 some
that's the reality of it.
that's pressure.
That was
That's
that was discussed at the workshop that I mentioned, specifically as one of the big battery energy storage system incidents that kind of was like a wake up, like, oh wait, what's going on here? Specifically for the fire
yeah.
service, because it was like we weren't necessarily awaiting that, and people think in this area that it's only something out west. They
Yeah,
happen
no, it
they're in, I've had a couple, I won't name sites and things like that. We've had ones in New York State. There's a lot of proposed installations in Jersey. They're all over the place that you're going to come across these things. So it's not a, West Coast firefighter thing.
yeah,
It's a modern
yeah.
fire environment problem that firefighters need to know how to deal with. Basically, threat assessment, right? You need to be able to understand what you're coming up against. And if you come up
100%.
against a container in a battery energy storage system environment, you have to know that what you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. It might not be a office trailer.
Right.
But you know what? Maybe we're seeing it more out west because there's more area to build large solar
Yeah,
farms. But
it is.
they're
That's
finding
100%
places
true.
in New Jersey to build them. They're
That
finding
that
places in Jersey to build them.
that's 100% true that it's more prevalent out there. I mean, most of the recent ones you saw in the news were in like Southern California and San Diego.
Yeah.
They had those. You had that Arizona one, but it's definitely more prevalent out there, and you may not find one as large as that over here. Even the solar production part may not be the same, but the utility scale battery storage system part is going to be similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. They're not they're not if you go up and down Route 1 and 130 in the Middlesex County area, they're not updating those the high voltage high lines for no reason, you know.
right. Yeah, that's true.
Sorry about that. Somebody's at
Okay.
the front door. I think it's a late trick or treater.
Right.
Sorry. It's after hours. Out of candy. Um so anyway, um moving on what so yeah, what else do you got? What what's next up on your agenda?
I mean, right now, kind of working on primarily like the things that you talked about, like the lithium battery conversation is currently still ongoing. So actually after the World Fire Congress, they established what they called communities of practice. And what the intention of that is, all the countries that attended have ongoing conversations of what works and what doesn't work internationally when you're
Mhm.
approaching uh, these various problems or priority areas for the fire service. So I'm one of the the leaders on the emerging technology one. So basically, we're gathering information from everywhere: Japan, Eastern European countries, South American countries, about what type of incidents they're coming across. And then they're doing the same thing on multiple fronts. So like the Wildland fire front.
Okay.
Um, I know that, for example, you had Superintendent Eric Skablix on your show,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
He's the leader of like the education and training community of practice. He's one of the leaders there, right? So the fire service as a whole worldwide is trying to figure out what works and doesn't work as far as learning platforms, training opportunities, things like that, which I think is huge.
Hmm.
I think for a long time, especially Jersey, Jersey is the land of many little kingdoms, I like to say, and when you expand that out, you have different jurisdictions in the United States, but even more than that, you have different countries dealing with similar problems that we have. And I think the World Fire Congress did a great job of providing a platform for the fire service across the world to come together and talk about how we can solve these problems. Like this morning, we had a conversation specifically about flooding, and that came from the deployments to North Carolina, and what they thought was going to happen in Florida. I know there was some in Florida, but then people in Poland and the Czech Republic, talked about their experiences recently of major flooding. So what works, what doesn't work. I think it was a great thing, and I'm proud to be a part of that because it's a worldwide conversation on fire service matters, and that's run by the U.S. Fire Administration. So it's not necessarily even just a fire investigation centric thing;
Hmm.
it's a fire service thing,
Yeah.
and it's pretty good. They have the next one. I think it's going to happen every 4 years. So the next one's going to be held in the UK. The one after that is going to be held in Dubai, and they have even more countries. Like I said, they had 56 countries at this one. I think they have like 108 countries registered already for the next one. So it's going to
That's
become a
crazy.
worldwide kind of major conference. I going to that was like eye opening because I've done like Firehouse Expo, when it was in Baltimore. I haven't gone to it when it was outside of Baltimore.
Yeah.
I've done FDIC, and you see it's like a big worldwide thing. This is just another platform that allows people to
Yeah.
come together and talk about problems.
And it's wild because he was when Superintendent Gablix was on, he was talking about uh, the World Fire Conference, and he's talking about a nation, I forget who it was,
Oh
that
yeah,
they were like, we can't fight a structural fire because we're wasting water, drinking
yeah.
water for our entire
While I
country.
was so I went to that as I was on the panel. I was part of the presentation panel for emerging technology, but of course I had the opportunity to hear all the other issues.
Absolutely.
And that was incredible too, right? They're talking about basically if you're talking about using potable water to put this fire out, that's a problem because we don't have water to live.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
That
then
that
there
takes
was
away from our
conversation.
drinking water for the
We
entire
were talking
country.
about in South America. I think it was people were talking about, yeah, you talk about cartels and gangs and this and stuff, the stuff like that we come, nowadays it's more and more common over here, but this is kind of stuff that they're dealing with on a regular basis. Like, oh, we have car bombings that are occurring on a regular
Yeah.
basis that we as the fire service have to deal with. Um, but yeah, they had representation from all over, including unique places like that. So it's eye opening when
Wild.
you get to hear people talk about their issues and you realize that you don't have issues that are that big in the grand scheme of things, because at least maybe you have some water. I mean,
Yeah.
some places don't got hydrants and then they got to deal with those tenders and tankers and stuff, but uh it gets interesting at that point. But yeah, I remember I had watched that episode that you had with him, and I remember him talking about that, and that made me think back to that. It was all kinds of stuff. I met people there too that it's like a small world thing. I remember years ago I actually went to teach in El Salvador, and I met a member of the national police over there, who's actually the father of a member of our fire company. And they had two representatives come from El Salvador there, and I'm talking to them, and I'm like, oh, hey, this guy? Oh, yeah, he did our training, this, that, everything. I was
Again,
kind of like,
comes back
wow.
to Jersey.
Yeah, it comes back to Jersey. I'm like, oh yeah, we know them, this, that, exactly. It was at the World Fire Congress with random people from El Salvador talking about this. It was crazy. Yeah.
See, it's crazy. It's funny that you mentioned flood. I mean, not flooding's not funny, but I did a fire investigation today down in a shore town down by Atlantic City, and I was like, "Oh, you know, how high was the water here during Sandy?" Because I saw what may have been corrosion or may
Hmm.
not have been,
Right.
and obviously, fire damage is fire damage, but it had that extra little look to it. And I'm like, how high was the flooding here for Sandy? And the guy like looked at me because being from Monmouth County, Seabright, those barrier islands in Monmouth County were, the houses were underwater from the roofs were underwater,
Right.
and down there it wasn't that bad. They're flooding, and I had to
Mm.
explain that. They're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, Sandy like wiped out
Sa-
houses up by me."
Sandy was an interesting
I was
experience
like,
too, because I ran a lot of calls during Sandy, but I was also working in the city doing a bunch of stuff, uh, and I actually ended up walking around post Hurricane Sandy flooding damage FEMA assessors in New York City for cost estimating how to replace structures and stuff. So in the Rockaways, I was over there, and you saw the damage that happened over there.
yeah,
And I remember one guy that was walking around with me. He showed up, and I met him, and I was a consultant, right? So I'm an engineering consultant, and I've done design and construction for the city. So the city would contract with people like me to say, all right, they need to understand how to replace this temporary classroom unit or something, or this boiler system in this building, whatever it may
okay,
be. This guy shows up. I remember he was wearing snakeskin boots. He was wearing a cowboy hat, and he was from Louisiana. And he
okay,
shows up and he goes, "All right, I'm here to come and cost estimate this." And I remember it was in Queens, and it was a they call it a TCU, temporary classroom unit, which is basically a double wide trailer that is supposed to be temporary, but it ends up sitting there for like 30 years. It's one of those
yeah,
things. And
yeah,
he
yeah,
comes in
yeah,
and goes, all right, looks around, size, this, that, or he's like, all right, yeah, this is what, like a 300,000 job. I was like, all right, I got to stop you right there. I'm going to explain to you how this is a $3 million job in the city of New York.
yeah,
It was eye opening for them. They sent this guy from New Orleans who's like, oh, yeah, this is a quick, 1, 2, 3 job. I was like, no, no, no.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I had to show them how you do stuff out there. And then the same thing here in Jersey. We had a bunch of them too, that we ended up doing. So that
yeah,
was an interesting experience during Sandy.
yeah. And then you get a job like people that we work for, and they're like, "No, no, that's a $300,000 down south. That's $3 million in New York City, and that's a $9 million project for us."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. And then we got this is the last picture I got from you. That's
That's I that ties back to Jersey, right? So that was at that Markel fire. Yeah, there you go. You got an actual picture of it when it was burning. That was an NRT call out here in Jersey that we helped out with. I mean, I think there was 36 buildings on a 12-acre property, and 31 of them burned down. So I think that would classify as a pretty big fire. And
the
that was an
little bit.
interesting one because you're going in and there's 8 foot tall rolls of paper that they use to recycled paper that they use to produce stuff. Talk about unlimited fuel load in an environment like that. That was a funny story on that. So we sometimes we do test burns and we do things on the field to help figure out what's going on and all that. So at some point we were having some conversations of maybe we'll do a test burn on one of these 8 foot giant rolls of paper to see what type of heat release rate and what type of fire development and growth you can get out of this. And we had this conversation, and you know where that's located. It's kind of right next to the New Jersey Turnpike and everything going on over there. They were like, yeah, no, we can't do that because the black smoke's going to
Yeah,
interfere with the turnpike and shut down traffic. So we're going to have to squash that idea. So, like, there's a Jersey consideration that you have to take into account, right? State police,
yeah,
no matter what you do, they don't want to shut down the highway, including a federal investigation into a
yeah,
fire.
exactly. The one time I can remember a state trooper just arbitrarily like showed up and shut down the road. I was in a I was volunteering in the department that covered 195, and we had a snowstorm. State trooper rolled his car in the median. First of all, it was like whiteout conditions, and in a matter of 20 minutes, it seemed like every trooper from West Trenton was on scene. I-95 was shut down in both directions,
Yeah, that's a rare
and
occurrence. That's pretty
and the
impressive, man.
helicopter was coming out of the snow in the
Right.
sky. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Luckily, the trooper was fine and everything was okay. But
Right.
It was
That's
just
good.
going to shut down, talking about shutting down interstates in New Jersey.
Right.
All right. So if you got nothing else, you want to get into the Jersey questions?
Sure.
Dun dun
Yeah. Whatever you
dun.
want to talk about.
Is it pork roll or Taylor ham?
So usually, if I put in an order, I'm putting in an order for pork roll, egg, and cheese with salt, pepper, ketchup on a roll. That's usually how I ask. So we're gonna go with
And
pork roll.
that's a North Jersey born guy right there saying pork roll.
I mean, the Taylor ham is a brand, right? That's not actually the product. So I don't know. I know there's always back and forth conversation on it. Like that's it seems kind of straightforward to me, but I don't know.
I I I have no opinion. It's just my questions. It's my
Right.
show. I ask the questions, and you, the guest, have your decisions and your life choices. Number 2, best pizza, and I mean you're a world traveler. Best pizza.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's speaking of being a traveler. Whenever I go someplace and they offer me pizza, bagels, even Italian food, I'm like, really, is that really what you want to kind of, try out here? And I have to explain to them that where I'm from and why you may not want to be doing something like that unless it was like a
Yeah.
last choice. But I don't know if I have a place for pizza, but I'll tell you what I do like. My favorite type of pizza is kind of like a thin bar pie, the kind of that you get at like Star Tavern. That's
Okay.
my favorite kind of pizza. And then my other favorite thing with pizza is that if you got pepperoni, I always insist that it's the right type of pepperoni that cups. It's got a cup on the pizza, It's got to have that
Oh yeah.
a little bit of pepperoni grease on the inside. So those are my
There you
requirements for delicious pizza.
You're a man after my own heart.
Yeah.
Do you go to the beach? You go down the shore.
Uh, if you're in Jersey, I'd say that you go down the shore. Um, I will say that I'm not necessarily like a huge beach person. It's give and take, right? So I go down to the shore because obviously I've been to like the boardwalks, spent plenty of time in Wildwood for the firemen's convention, been to beaches and like, Asbury Park, Seaside, things like all that kind of stuff. But when I travel, I usually make a statement that I want to go to the beach because I want to be able to dip my toes in every body of water that I encounter. So I have, been in water all around the world. And usually when I'm out and about, I say, let's go to the beach. But in Jersey, it's you go down to the shore, right?
All right. I agree. Now, does Central Jersey really exist?
My my answer to that is yes, because I'm from North Jersey, and I think that when you say South Jersey, it's kind of like you talked about. It's almost the sticks down there, and in between you have a Central Jersey. Anything south of the Driscoll Bridge, I think I would agree is kind of South Jersey. I don't know. I'm not sure if I know the line of demarcation between North and Central, but I think Central Jersey is a thing. I say that I'm from North Jersey and I live in Central Jersey now.
All right. All right. I like it. I like it. I like where your head's at. We're on the same page.
Mhm.
Uh, well, now the next part of that is where are you drawing your northern and southern borders? Yours.
Yeah, so I mean, like, no, like Central Jersey exists with like what, like Middlesex County, Somerset County, I guess Monmouth County. People say that's kind of like Central Jersey, I think. And I think that the southern border would be the Driscoll Bridge. Anytime you go over on the going down on the Parkway and you get to that,
So
that's
that's your
your
north
automatic.
central border.
Yeah,
Now, where's
that's
your
like.
central South Jersey border?
Well, I think my central South Jersey border would be the Driscoll Bridge, kind of. Then North Jersey is like when you're getting up into, I don't know, when I start going into like Elizabeth, Newark, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, maybe that Union
No,
County
that's what I'm
kind of.
saying. So the Driscoll Bridge is your north to central.
Yep.
Where are we going with our central to South Jersey border?
Ah, I don't know. I don't know where you want to define the southern border as uh, for down there. I just know that there is a Central Jersey. I 100% agree. I can't tell you like I mean, so some people would be like people talk about Ocean County and stuff like that. That's pretty south to me, even if you're
Yeah.
going to Ocean County. But I think some people would say that those kind of places are still part of like Central Jersey, right? I don't know.
Only the people that live there think that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I get So like I get meetings in like Trenton. And I was like, oh, you want me to go all the way down to South Jersey for this? And then they're like, Trenton, that's I'm like, no, that's pretty far down south to me. So
Yeah. I like it. All right. So next question. Who are or were some of your mentors?
that's an interesting question because I feel like if I started naming people, I'm gonna forget people that have been influential in the way I think about things and get to stuff. But I know that a lot of the people that I've come across over the years have been they provided me like a foundation of kind of the way I think about stuff. Like even when I joined the volunteer fire service, there were guys around at the firehouses that had been around for decades. Like you think about the level of service that you provide to be someplace for 40 years, 50 years. And I worked with, I learned from a lot of those guys early on in my fire service career that I remember. And then like there's people like you mentioned, I think you had mentioned Dan Madrikowski and stuff like that before. That's a kind of a person that I think about all the time because I had seen a lot of stuff that he had like put out there, right? He's an engineer. He involved in research for the fire service as well as for fire investigations. He worked for NIST and he works for ULFSRI now. And an interesting thing like that is like this is somebody that I'd seen a lot of lectures from and learned from. And then nowadays, when I'm doing things like he was there with me at the World, I think I sat next to him at the World Fire Congress dinner in the Library of Congress. So that was
That's
pretty
awesome.
like, oh, I'm sitting next to somebody over here that I'm sure people are wondering like, hey, who's this guy sitting next to Dan Madrikowski? That's kind of how I feel about these things. But you
Well,
got
now that
people
you've been on NJ Fire Guys, people are going to be like, "Who's this guy sitting next to Mike Abraham?"
maybe, but no, that there's people like that I come across all the time. Like when I first started doing fire investigations and stuff, I met Barry Grimm pretty early on, and he's just like an awesome, like a true Jersey guy, right? You need to have it. Has he been on your show? He needs to be on your
Not
show.
yet, not yet.
Yeah,
But again, that's one of those guys that like I took for granted that I've known Barry since I was Mr. Graham, Detective Graham. Like
yeah,
I've known him since I was a kid. Like
yeah.
he,
He's done a lot of work with the ATF,
phenomenal.
and he teaches at the National Fire Academy a
I was
lot, and
gonna say
I've
National Fire Academy and
yeah, see him left and right. I when I go up there and stuff like that, I see him once in a while, but we stay in touch. And you could tell like when you see somebody like him, like I meet people from all over the country, and everybody remembers Barry, and in a positive light. They're like, I learned a lot from people like Barry just because of the way he can talk about fire investigation and the way he gets points across and never heard a bad thing. And those are the kind of people I think about that I've learned a lot from and in doing what we're doing. So
yeah, absolutely. Um, so proudest achievement on
um
the job.
well, I mean, if it's like what I'm doing now, I mean, to be honest, to be a part of like that World Fire Congress was pretty incredible. That was an opportunity to kind of be in the room with like basically the highest ranking fire service people and or government officials from all those countries, so that was pretty impressive. But I would say, generally speaking, my greatest achievement is the fact that I get to bring answers to help people, figure out what happened at some of the worst times of their lives. That's kind of what I like doing. Somebody once told me that we're trying to speak for those who can't speak anymore, and I take that to heart. When I'm trying
Yeah,
to figure out something, we're trying to do it in a way that tells a story for somebody that may not be able to tell what actually happened here, whether it's no matter the circumstances. So the fact that I'm able to, given the opportunity to travel around the world and the country and do that with people, whether it's teaching, whether it's working a fire scene, I appreciate the ability to be able to do that. And that's probably the highlight of the opportunities that I'm presented with.
wow, wow. That was a very humbling answer. I like that. I like it. Very impressed. Last question. What advice do you have for the fire service?
Oh, that's I think, continuously like learning and seeking, knowledge is probably the best thing. Like when I first started as a volunteer firefighter, it was kind of like you learned a lot of things that was handed down through through tradition and just kind of like the way we did things. But I think that it's really important in the fire service to learn from, you know, research and from, people's experiences dealing with modern things. So if people aren't regularly like, reading up on all the free opportunities for improving themselves, like you mentioned, like FSRI, for example, you don't even have to pay anything to gain a lot of the
Yeah,
information that they're putting out there. So it's not like it's a cost prohibitive thing. It's really keeping yourself ahead of the game, not only for yourself as a firefighter, but also for your crew, the people that you work with. Right? There may be a time that comes where you're going to be the only thing standing between them and yourself getting out of a situation. And I hope that you
100%.
have enough knowledge, training, and experience to put to use at that time to survive. And I think that's important. So one of the ways
Absolutely.
people can do that is kind of continuously learning and training about stuff.
Absolutely. 100%. I couldn't have said that better myself. I say that all the time to the guys at work. Um, you're not training for you. You're training for the guy in front of you, the guy behind you,
Right?
and you know what? Like you said before, giving that voice to the person that can't speak anymore. Like you're there because somebody called you on your worst day. Like that's
Yeah,
why we train,
that's right.
is to do our job for those around us.
Yeah, I think
You know,
that's true from all aspects of the fire service, whether you're doing suppression, fire investigation, anything having to do with it, you should be doing the best you can for the people that you're, serving and working for.
yeah. If you mop floors for a living, mop the floors, mop the floors for the customer. You don't mop the
Absolutely.
floors because you like mopping floors. It's your job. Do the job.
Agreed.
Um, all right. Well, that's the last of my questions for you. You got anything else, or want to bring anything up? You're going to be speaking anywhere anytime soon, or
Nothing special going on in the immediate future. There's probably going to be things coming up in the new year, trying to lay some things out. I guess keep a lookout for the name. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Like I mentioned, and I truly mean it, that you've had a lot of heavy hitters, is the way that I would put it, on your podcast so far. Not sure why exactly I'm in that group, but I'm happy to be
you
here,
are.
and it
You're a
was,
heavy hitter, bro. I mean,
it
come
was a great
on.
experience. So
International Fire Conference Congress. Come on. I didn't get
yeah,
an invite to that.
for the next one, we'll work on something.
No, they don't want me in UK. They'll steal. They'll take. They won't let me back in the country. I got to be careful with that.
Nice. Well, listen, we all have those places that we're no longer allowed in. I got you.
Kmart, Chuck E. Cheese.
Exactly.
uh, all right. So, you got any shout outs you want to say hi to anybody or?
No, I mean, I think everybody that I work with and I've spent time with. I mean, a lot of the guys that early in my fire service career, they're out there kind of doing their thing as career firemen all over the place, and everybody they all knew who they are and stuff. So I wish them the best on everything that they do, and I'm glad to see everybody thriving and excelling, not just thriving at what they're doing. I've seen that across the board, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, brother. Well, I will not take up any more of your time. I know you're a busy, busy man and highly sought after. You probably got a flight to I don't know, Pacific Northwest, Colorado, somewhere.
Yep, plenty of places. Yep. Thanks for having me again, though.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it, as I'm sure our viewers have and will in the future, because this is on the internet, so it is out there forever. Can't take it
Sounds
back.
good.
All
Okay.
right, brother. Be safe. I'm gonna put you in the backstage area. We'll say our goodbyes off air.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
All right. All right, everybody. That wraps up another amazing episode. Run number 36 with Mike Abraham. Another amazing guest. Another amazing show. If you like what you're seeing, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next week, stay safe, everybody. Have a good one.